Tonight, a nationwide police alert following a devastating shooting here in Montreal.
And controversial government maneuver to buy up empty condos in Vancouver.
And a final whistle on public broadcasting as Canada's definitive sports tradition moves entirely behind a corporate paywall. From Montreal, episode 89 of Night Talk Canada starts now. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And as usual, just down the street from Gary, I'm Eddie Tekalik. Tonight, when public institutions face unprecedented strain and the free market tightens its grip, who's left holding the risk? Let's get started.
A devastating shooting attack here in Montreal earlier this week has triggered a nationwide police alert exposing vulnerabilities in federal public safety frameworks. As communities demand accountability, lawmakers face intense pressure over systemic failures to prevent predictable violence. Tragic scene unfolding late Monday morning into the afternoon, Eddie. A lot of witnesses described it as like a scene from a movie, the way that it all unfolded. A police firefight, and in the end, 3 people dead, including the shooter. I was totally shocked to you hear the odd shooting and things, but to see where it was happening and the amount of people in that area at any given time in the little playground park area out front in between the 2 buildings where the gunfight took place. It's to me, it's amazing that more people weren't injured or even killed. And you were just saying, just before we went to air, you were saying you were just over in that area last summer.
Yeah, I was, Gary. We were there celebrating a wedding. A friend of mine's daughter got married, and at the Hilton, right across the street, and right in where all of this started happening. And we walked through the parking area, through the grocery store there. I mean, that entire section. When we saw it on television, it's like, oh my goodness, we were there last year, and it's a real nice, posh, new development there. It's real nice community there. So when we actually realized that there was this shooting in that particular area, both my wife and I were pretty surprised by that. And and the funny thing too is, like, just last week, my wife and I were driving in the Cotonage area, and she had said, "Oh well, you know what? It's really interesting. We have all these diverse cultures in this city here. We have all these diverse restaurants, and you very, very rarely hear about any form of violence in this area, right?" And 4 or 5 days later, we get this shooting, Gary. I think the entire, not just the city, the entire province is just in shock. We'll talk about it in a bit, but just in shock that, oh my God, this can happen here, and really disheartening to see that. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, I think we had a constable in the Toronto area that got killed during an investigation, and then we had the OPP officer also getting killed last week. So that's like, what, 3 officers in a matter of 2-3 weeks that have been downed in the line of duty. And funny enough, we in our recent broadcast, we were both saying how dangerous their jobs are in terms of protecting the public and serving the public. And lo and behold, here we have another tragedy that's just unfolded in front of us.
And just the night before the shooting here in Montreal, 2 Mounties were critically injured in a shooting when they responded to a domestic dispute in a small community in Saskatchewan. So
Yes,
it's and I was just sitting here thinking what a difference a week or so makes, because last week on our stream, our very first segment dealt with a whole night shift at one of the North End police stations here in Montreal being suspended and
Right.
moved out of that area because of allegations of systemic racism in
Racial
their
profiling and whatnot. Yeah.
in racial profiling. So, and the police chief at the time held a late Friday night news conference to confirm the media reports that yes, and that an investigation was underway, and that two of the officers involved were probably facing some kind of charges in addition to whatever else. And then here he is, just a little over a week later, and now having to report on losing one of his officers and another officer in critical condition.
She's in critical condition. Yes.
So, wow, what a week it's been for the Montreal Police Service on both sides of it. And I recall both of us saying in last week's stream that this group of individuals, this night shift, and they're all 5 years service or less, the blight that they put on the work that the entire service does, and how they put a black mark on the department with their behavior, and then there you go. A few days later,
Yeah.
you have one of their own shot and killed, and another one severely injured. And I just can't even begin to imagine how that police officer, the woman police officer who was injured, her recovery mentally is going to be a long, long road, and it's going to be a very difficult road if she ever totally recovers from the PTSD that she's going to be suffering as a result of what she went through.
Sure.
You train and train and train for different situations, but until all of a sudden you're in it, in the middle of it. And when you look at some of the video that's been circulating on social media, he was on, near the end of it, he was on one end of a planter and she was on the other end. And so, like, if she put her head up or looked around, all she could see would be the barrel of his rifle, or long gun as they call them. So just and just the people in the area and how they must feel now, like their sense of community has been violated. Now, let's take it another step and look at the fact that shortly after things started to level off on Monday afternoon, an RCMP unit, security unit in BC sent out a message, an internal message to police departments across the country, warning to be on high alert that this incident could very well foster some copycat incidents.
Right.
And when you look at the fact that the shooter left behind a 104-page manifesto and covered a lot of ground in that 104-page document, it wasn't just one thing in particular that was driving him. Now, he's from Lethbridge, Alberta. He was an honor student at the University of Lethbridge. Neighbors describe him as standoffish, like very introverted. And they really didn't know a lot about him. And he writes his manifesto, packs up, and comes to Montreal. Now, why Montreal? Well, in there he's talking about things like pornography and issues like that. And of course, in the building across the courtyard from the hotel where he was staying, the
It's not
Hilton,
too far from there, right?
yeah, is the office of the parent company of Pornhub.
Right.
And apparently he fired some shots over in the direction of those offices. So, you know, how many more are out there right now that we don't know about? And we could very well end up with a copycat incident or a couple of copycat incidents along the same lines across the country. You just
Yeah.
don't know anymore.
Well, and that's
And
the whole thing with the manifesto. I mean, this thing published in social media, published on the dark web. Who the hell knows? Pick this up, and you know what? There were some excerpts that the police actually did show that were reported on as well. And just by the language being used in the manifesto, this was not somebody who didn't make high school, didn't graduate high school, and came out of a farm somewhere. This was definitely an educated, disturbed, obviously educated person who wrote this manifesto up, 100 plus pages. So this is not somebody that just decides one day I'm going to go shoot up a place and that's the end of that. Um, this is somebody who had a point to make. I mean, taking the time to write a 100 plus page manifesto, very detailed manifesto and well worded manifesto. Why wouldn't someone like this publish this thing? So I think you're right, Gary. There's a certain sense of fear, at least from my perspective, of who else has read this and who else is out there that's going to follow in the footsteps of this disturbed young man who decided to shoot up our city, shoot up our police officers, and whatever else he can get his sights on. It is scary, and of course that begs the next question, Gary. Who's First of all, who? But I think the bigger question is, how on earth can something like this be prevented tomorrow, next week, and the week after that? How? And it's an age-old question of are we supposed to watch over our shoulders at every moment of the day to make sure that you're in surroundings that you feel particularly safe in? Well, if you look at that environment over in Côte-des-Neiges in front of the Hilton Hotel, you'd never think anything like this would go down in that area. So even if you're prudent and careful, you just never know. It's not a seedy neighborhood. Place is it's a well developed area. So that just goes to show you that something like this can happen at any time. And I was going to go down to the investigation of the BEI here in Quebec, along with the RCMP. Um, at some point, I'd certainly like to know who knew about this potential individual, this disturbed person, taking an action such as this. Uh, and I would not be surprised if somebody knew about this individual being a potential threat and maybe not acting upon it because of the Charter of Rights and whatnot. But number one, it'll be interesting to see what they find quickly and what the investigations are going to turn up. And the second thing, Gary, and we've talked about this on a few of our shows. Um, how do you prevent something like this? Well, the incident happened, and every time you have a major incident like this, you learn from it. How quickly can we learn from this to prevent it from happening in Montreal tomorrow? And how do we help the other police forces based on this tragedy here in Montreal help prevent this from happening again tomorrow? And you know what? The first thing that came to my head, and I mentioned this before, shades of the Dawson College shooting some 20 years back, where You know, just by happenstance, my son didn't happen to be in that building when he was initially scheduled to be in there, didn't show up, and people died there with the shooting. So it brought me back to that right off the bat as a parent, and the question is always, how do we prevent this from happening again, and can we ever prevent this from happening again anywhere in the country? The rest of the world's got its problems. The United States has got their problems with guns, gun ownership being out of control. But let's look within our borders, right? How do you prevent something like this, and how frequently does it happen? Well, we had 3 police officer shootings in the last couple of weeks. We have innocent bystanders getting hit who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This stuff is just a tragedy all around, Gary. So over to you, man. How does somebody prevent something like this? And let's say there's 100 of these guys out there. Well, how do we keep tabs of these 100 people without prying into their privacy, right?
Well, there is that, unless you have some kind of evidence where you can get the warrant to put the individual under surveillance, all forms of his or her communications and what have you. So there is that side of it, but everything is moving so quickly, Eddie, now in the world, and we are really in instant communications mode as far as contact everywhere. And you mentioned the dark web. That is just a cesspool of information that, when it falls into the wrong hands or people are radicalized on there, you have no control. You just don't know until something happens, or somehow they make a mistake and they tip their hand, or monitoring, the special departments of various police forces and national police forces, and CSIS, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if
Right.
they discover something in a communication. But imagine in the run of a day the number of communications just on the dark web, or even just on the regular web, to be monitored. You can't monitor all of them. And unless there's something that points you in a specific direction, and it's the same on, look at with artificial intelligence. There's monitoring to a point, but how far do you go with that monitoring? And when humans become involved, are they, in the right position at the right time with the right information to make a call? That's the other side of it.
Right.
And there are a number of other questions coming out of this, like intelligence gaps, as we're talking about, delayed interprovincial communications. Did that allow a known threat vector to escape or escalate unchecked? We don't know. And that's where some of the investigation, and I hope that they're really open and honest with what they do find in the investigation. But here's something else to consider.
Mm-hmm.
This is all pointing to something else, 2 other issues in this country that are front and center almost every other day. That's federal and provincial leaders facing a fierce backlash over whether current gun control and mental health funding are failing on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Gun control, to me, gun control, the way that we're approaching it, and I understand there are gun enthusiasts, the same as there are internet enthusiasts and technology enthusiasts and gardening enthusiasts, and you name it.
Right.
And I understand that they look upon even the assault weapons, the high-powered assault weapons, as part of their,
Hobby.
hesitate to use the word hobby, but their enthusiasm. And really, when you consider what kind of carnage those weapons can cause very, very easily, but our approach to gun control really has been more with the people who are honest about it,
Hmm.
honest about their weapons, and I'm sure probably 95 to 98% of these people are extremely careful, and they are
Hmm.
used for hunting or controlling different animals and that on their farms and, and those sorts of things. I'm sure they're being targeted with the gun control. They're the people because they're right there.
Yeah.
But to me, the type of gun control we're trying to enforce in this country is like locks. It's for the honest people.
Hmm.
If criminals want to get into your place, they're going to get into your place. If criminals want guns, they're going to get guns. And we have a lot of guns flowing in from the US, which was
Hmm.
brought up a year ago when the White House started complaining about the fentanyl coming in from Canada. Well, I said it then, and I'll say it again. Whatever is coming across the border into your country, shame on you,
Hmm.
because your border enforcement isn't doing its job. And your intelligence that you're feeding to your border enforcement isn't solid. So when the White House started whining and going on about fentanyl coming in through Canada, why in the hell aren't you looking at your border patrol people? You know, the
Yeah.
same as
Yeah.
what's with our border patrol people? Why are we not catching more illegal gun shipments? I mean, where's the
Yeah.
intelligence? Even though we're in a trade war, police services on both sides of the border are talking to one another. There's intelligence being shared.
Yeah.
Why aren't we getting more of the drugs in the US? Why aren't they getting more? And why aren't we intercepting more of these illegal guns
All
coming
these
into the
weapons.
country?
Yeah. Well, see, in this the whole thing, I like the way you said that. The gun control, unfortunately, it's to try to corral the small majority of the people who have these weapons, which ends up punishing those that are law-abiding citizens that are using their weapons properly and storing them properly and using them for hunting, or using some of the more recognized weapons we don't consider as assault weapons, and basically, using them to, as part of a hobby, which is fair enough. And why are our gun control laws, where people are responsible for it, trying to identify those individuals that potentially might want to buy a gun that are not all there? They're not running on full thrusters. The criminal element. We've always said it, Gary. There's always one group of individuals or one person that'll screw it up for the next 100 people. And that's tough. Finding that one person out of 100 that's going to have a weapon, possess a weapon, or try to gain access to a weapon, an assault weapon, which we're trying to outlaw. Um, that's the challenge in identifying what drives a person and motivates a person to carry one of these things, and how do we prevent them? Is it just a criminal nature of the individual, just being an outright evil criminal person, or are we talking about mental health issues here? We don't know anything about this fellow from Lethbridge. All we know that he was a loner, a high functioning loner, no less. I mean, he was on the honor roll in school. Wrote a 100-page manifesto in very good English. So obviously an educated young man, but troubled, absolutely troubled. How do you identify these individuals and prevent them from getting their hands on a weapon. I don't remember. I don't think they even reported exactly what type of weapon he had. If it was an assault rifle or it was a long gun. I think it was a long gun actually, because he had to load it. He had to reload it one at a time. So it comes down to prevention, Gary. So how do you prevent? Prevent the damn weapons from getting into the country, which is A, which is the assault rifles, and B, how do you identify these individuals that might be prone or there's a potential of them trying to get their hands on a weapon when they're not mentally well? That comes down to bodies, Gary. Lots of bodies. And how committed and willing are our government officials, municipal, provincial, and federal, how willing are they to find the monies necessary to put these task forces together in every jurisdiction to focus on just that? Starting with the Border Patrol, that's one area in terms of eliminating or minimizing the amount of this crap that's coming from the United States in terms of weaponry. And how do we identify people that are struggling? You know what, Gary? The criminal element is always going to be the criminal element. They're always going to be there, right? But more often than not, you see most of these shootings happening with people that don't have criminal records. These are just sick
True.
people. How do you prevent that? And that's what scares me, because, you know, you're looking at me right now, Gary. You don't know what's going on in my head. I'm a nice guy. Nobody would even suspect I would do anything like this. But what if there was somebody just like me out there, nice, whatever else, going out there and finding a weapon someplace that I shouldn't be buying it from and just going out and shooting people? That's the scary part. And I think Greg mentioned it before, and I think the last time he was on with us, when he had said, looking at a person, you just don't know how sick they are unless you
True.
ask and find out. You just don't know what a person is going through. I mean, in that particular conversation, it was more about mental illness and suicide. But, you know, this is the same parallel as well. You look at someone, you just don't know. And I would be surprised if the people in Lethbridge, Alberta, who knew this young man, had any concept that this man was very troubled. And if people did know that it was extremely troubled, and the authorities knew that it was extremely troubled, then it's a whole other slew of questioning that we have to throw at the authorities, right? But at the end of the day, we're all, unfortunately for the minority in our population, we're all walking targets, Gary. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know how much more bluntly I can put that.
And even more so now, Eddie, it never ceases to amaze me when I'm walking through an airport, walking in downtown Montreal, downtown small towns somewhere. It never ceases to amaze me the number of people who are not aware of their surroundings. Not aware of their surroundings at all, because they're buried in their phones, and or they have headphones on or their earpods in and listening to music or a podcast, and they're not aware of what's going on around them. How many times have you watched people step off the sidewalk onto the street and all of a sudden realize, oh, you know, because maybe somebody honks a horn or somebody hollers or whatever. But we are so unaware of what's going on around us that it's just we're walking targets. And that's why when you have some of these incidents where involving vehicles, for example, it's extremely easy to turn that into a mass casualty event, just because people are totally checked out. They're totally unaware of their surroundings. And we have to start dealing with that. We have to start also, and I mentioned it early on about mental health and mental health funding. There has been a growing cry from the mental health community for more funding over the last few years. And it seems to be falling on deaf ears at the political level. But like it or not, for a whole lot of reasons, as far as pressure, daily pressures that people are dealing with, look at now, the last 2 years, or a year and a half, I guess, what a roller coaster ride that has been and still is and will be for another year and a half and a little bit beyond. Just think, and because we're on the internet, we have instant communications with the outside world all over the world. We're getting it thrown at in our face almost every waking minute of every day.
Non-stop, yeah.
And that's why, I've reached out to Greg Zed a couple of times now, and we've had him on the show a couple of times talking about trying to deal with these kinds of issues and mental health. Because I feel it's important, and if we have the ability to get the message out there with somebody like Greg, who spent his career working in the mental health field, and we touch one person, then we've managed to do something positive.
Right.
And as far as I'm concerned, we will have Greg back on more than one occasion going into the future, because I feel that every day that goes by, mental health in this country becomes a bigger issue. It's a clock that's ticking, and that alarm is going to go off sooner rather than later for some people. And they don't know where to turn. And when they do find somewhere to turn, the mental health facilities are overwhelmed. They don't have enough staff. They don't have enough funding. It's a vicious circle. So there's that aspect of it as well, that we have to start treating mental health a little more seriously at all political levels.
Right.
And also, this whole incident over the last couple of days, the aftermath of Monday's shootings, it also brings and highlights the fact that the people we rely on for our enforcement of laws and our protection, they're perpetually now chasing threats rather than neutralizing them.
Yeah.
They're not getting ahead. They're unable to get ahead. And part of that is because the other side, the dark side, is as good, if not better, at using the web and the tools that the web put at their disposal for evil.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to start looking at both of these issues, the security side of it and also the mental health side of it. For the general population, the security side of it, at the policing and security, national security levels, and also their mental health as well. Because they're out there dealing with a lot of this stuff every day, 8, 10, 12, 15 hours a day, sometimes more.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our mental health specialists, our experts, our police forces that deal with this stuff every day, Gary, even if they don't go through a personal traumatic situation themselves, they all face PTSD, all of them, in just doing their day-to-day work, listening to this, helping the not mentally challenged, but helping the people that are having some mental challenges, that are distraught. officers that are seeing the worst in humanity day in and day out. I mean, at some point, they all experience some level of mental anguish. And I'm sure the police forces and whatnot have the necessary psychologists and psychological help bring to bear when they need it. But it's just every day it's getting worse and worse, and we're all exposed to this every day, Gary, nonstop. Whether it's watching television, YouTube, your phone. I mean, there's always just something that's alerting you about something that's going on. And you know what? I looked at our leaders. Um, our mayor, Commissioner Fadi here in Commissioner Dogger, I'm sorry, here in Montreal, uh, our provincial, our premier here in Quebec, Frechette, Prime Minister Carney, everybody, you know what? They looked so emotionally distraught and almost defeated and sad, and just offering their thoughts and prayers. Okay, Gary, let's call a spade a spade. It's going to end that thoughts and prayers. I don't have the confidence that every one of these individuals who are impacted by this tragedy, don't take anything away from that. They're saddened by this. I think they're also looking for answers and trying to figure out, A, how could I have prevented this? B, how can I prevent it from happening tomorrow with everything that's going on in the world today? They're they're hamstrung, tied, their hands are tied behind their backs. Meanwhile, you and I, and citizens of this city and this country, are still expecting them to do something about it. So what am I going to expect? This is going to happen again, and they're all going to get in front of a microphone and say our thoughts and prayers, and they're going to look distraught. And I know they really feel distraught, but are we in a losing battle here, Gary?
I think so. I think
I think so, huh?
yeah, at this point in time, yes, definitely. You have laws, you have a lack of funding, you have a lack of policies. One thing I came up with the other day in doing some research here, like municipal police forces are being left to manage the immediate carnage of broader federal policy deficits regarding illegal border weapons and mental
Hmm.
health oversight.
Right.
It always comes back down in situations like this. It always comes back down to the municipal level, the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And by the way, I popped a question into the comments. Do you feel less safe in Canada's major urban centres today than you did 5 years ago?
Mm.
Do you?
Safer?
No, less
No,
safe.
I less safe. Yeah, I do feel less safe, regardless of the effort and the work that the our badged people are doing out here. They're doing some great work out here, but I'm always feeling like they're playing catch up. I mean, every time you see something on the news, they're always just one step behind the bad guy. So just that into consideration, even on our neighborhood, really nice neighborhood, Gary. I mean, we have seen the darker side of life walking around the streets. Very vigilant eye on that. You can't just say, oh, it's just one of those things. You got to be vigilant about it, no matter where you're at, whether you're in a more questionable area of the city or in a more charming area of the city. You just have to be careful. You just don't know. So, answer your question, no, I do not feel safer.
No, I definitely, my level of awareness has gone up. My confidence in my safety has diminished. And it's not that I'm putting the blame on any one particular aspect of it, other than right at the top where it sits, Ottawa, Quebec City, any provincial
Hmm.
capital, as far as looking at some of these issues and saying, okay, stop with the politics and the political theater and let's get to work on all sides. Because we do elect them to do a job, and once the election is over, go to work for the citizens who put you there.
Hmm.
Well, it doesn't matter what stripe, you're there to do a job collectively, not try to get the great clip for TikTok or
Right.
YouTube Shorts or whatever.
Gary, wouldn't you say for any politician, doesn't matter at what level, this is an easy win to say the buck stops here. The line is drawn in the sand. This is what's going to happen moving forward because we're going to be preventing A, B, C, and D so our citizens of Montreal would feel safer. What person in opposition in politics is going to criticize somebody who's trying to fix something? I really
You
don't
would,
see the political damage of doing something like this. So why doesn't someone just take that step and say the line is drawn now? This is what we're doing. I can't let's just list them off. Federally, Carney do something about this. You think Poilievre is going to jump on the bandwagon and say you're an idiot, Carney? Blah 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 blah. We're not going to protect the police officers. We're not going to protect pedestrians and people walking on the street by enforcing gun laws. Everything. It would be political suicide for the opposition to push against something as simple as making our streets safer, whether it's in Quebec City, in Ottawa, or here in City Hall just down the street from us. Do something. I don't know how else to put it. Very, very bluntly, just do something about it. You know what? You and I, we talked about this before. How often have you put your job on the line for what's right? I'm sure you can't count on both hands. Same for me. I put my job on the line for what's right. I don't understand why the politicians can't do that, especially for something that relates to public security, and it's happening with more frequency, based on what we're seeing.
well, it's not an isolated local crime story, that's for sure, and
Yeah.
it's a proof point of a fractured national security and public safety architecture unable to coordinate effectively under pressure.
Right.
And that's what it's coming down to, and that's essentially what we've said. They don't have the tools to keep up with what's happening on the other side in the dark web. And even when you get into terrorism,
Hmm.
and of course that was one of the first questions when the media briefing was held the other day. Is this an act of terrorism?
Right.
Well, it's been, I guess, really ruled out as an act of terrorism, but it's still an act of a broader, loosely structured movement of people who are suffering due to a lack of mental health.
Right.
A lack of mental health assistance of being available to them. And whether they would go on their own or whether all of a sudden you have to call the police and the police come in and they pick them up on a mental health warrant and get them in and get them the help that they need. But we are, as a society, and I'll speak to Canada in particular, we really do have to start taking mental health much more seriously, and we have to start providing the funding to deal with mental health, because every day, there's another little chip coming out for pretty much every person in this country.
Yeah.
And as I say, the last year and a half, almost 2 years, has just been a roller coaster ride, and you just don't know what's coming next. And it changes 5 minutes later. sometimes 2 minutes later, or maybe 3 hours later. But you're just in that state, constant state of anticipation all the time. And that's not good.
Yeah.
That is not good at all. So,
Well, Gary,
Eddie,
before we get to our takeaway, maybe we can find somebody who'd be willing to come on the show and to talk to us about how we as citizens can actually take greater precautions and work hand in hand with the police, and them giving us guidance on how we can be more vigilant. Maybe one of these days we can bring somebody on the show to talk about that with us. So that'd be great if we can accomplish that.
yeah,
Anyway, Gary.
that's a great idea, and yeah, let's get to work on that. So our takeaway, Eddie, is this: the tragedy earlier this week in Montreal reveals the institutional guardrails built to protect Canadian lives, and that they are fracturing under modern criminal realities.
Mhm.
Up next, the Vancouver Buyout. Are you ready for this one?
Yeah.
I can't believe what's happening there. But anyway, we'll be back after this.
What used to take a full crew and $1 million studio now fits right on your Mac. For years, professional video meant complicated setups, endless editing, and tools that never quite work together. Meet Ecamm. Ecamm is a complete broadcast studio built for Mac. Record, stream, and present all from one place. And with dual mode, you can stream in wide and vertical at the same time, so your content's ready for every platform. From live shows to podcasts, virtual events to video courses, training sessions, even Zoom meetings, webinars, and presentations. Ecamm gives you control and a studio that just works the way you do. Built exclusively for Mac, so it's simple, elegant, and insanely capable. Ecamm, your broadcast studio.
Folks, I hope you're sitting for this one. There's a sweeping federal provincial proposal in Vancouver aims to address the housing crisis by using public funds to buy unsold private condos and convert them into affordable housing units. While proponents frame it as immediate relief, critics argue it shifts private real estate risk onto you, the taxpayer.
Well,
You go, Gary. Over to you.
first of all, let me say this. The idea has merit to a point. However, that point is much larger than the merit that the idea has, in my humble opinion. Vancouver, as we all know, is the most expensive housing market in Canada.
Correct.
And they are still building condos. And the pricing that the developers are still pricing them like the peak of the condo market a few years ago. And we know that right across the country, condo markets have gone soft.
Yeah.
Toronto's another area where watch out, because they'll be, if they get away with this one, they'll be turning to Toronto next. But there are a number of questions that I don't see being addressed here. One of them is, are some of these units not finished? And if they're not finished, then that means in addition to buying them out, are they going to buy them with the developer finishing them? And that will be included in the price that they pay the developer? Are they already finished, sitting empty, never been sold? So a lot of them would have high-end features, because that's the kind of market it was in Vancouver at its peak.
Mm-hmm.
And if so, how do you set a fair rental and keep it under the definition of affordable housing?
in a building that was built for luxury.
Right. Now,
Right.
also, a question I have is some of these buildings, now I'm not sure how it works in BC, but I know in New Brunswick, when you reach a certain level of units sold in a building, then the developer can turn it over to the condo board that
Mhm.
is assembled and comes into law and takes ownership of the building. So if you have some people who have, for instance, a building that in pre-sale, they bought in pre-sale, and they're getting ready to move into their new unit because it's finished, and some of these other units aren't finished, and you've got the feds and the province coming in with their money to buy these empty units and turn them into affordable housing. And I bought into a building that was going to have it set up under the regulations that owners only, and no investors and renting their units out, and of course no Airbnbs and whatever. I don't know. I'd be pretty pissed, to put it bluntly, to find out that
Yeah.
all of a sudden half or better of the building's going to be turned into affordable housing rental units. Not that I have anything against but when I bought my unit, I was buying a unit in a building that was going to be all owner occupied. Because then, like, how does the condo board, if there's a, as they call them out there, a strata board, if the strata board is in place and the developer sells off the rest of his units, I mean, would this cover that, or are they looking at buildings that have been started and are empty? They haven't sold a unit, not even on pre-sale. That,
Yeah.
okay, you have the basic infrastructure, and you finish it at builder grade or slightly above builder grade for affordable rental units. Yes, I get the idea that if you've got something underway, you can get it finished faster and get people into units faster. I get that. And I think it has merit to a point.
Right.
But let's be a little bit clearer here, because I understand that this $3 billion program with Ottawa and Victoria putting money into it. I read something the other day where the EB government canceled another provincial affordable housing program,
Worth billions.
and worth $3 billion.
Yeah.
So as one of the opposition members said, you're just trading dollars. So there's that, but there are too many, because what happens, you're socializing a developer's mistakes.
Yeah.
The developers can go out and overbuild, misread the market, although I doubt that they have misread the market. The demand was there at some point, but it takes a couple of years to get the shovels in the ground and have concrete form rising out of that hole.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot can happen in a couple of years. The other side of it is, are they not selling because they're asking way too much? They still have pie in the sky ambitions on pricing? That's the other side of it. So are we, as taxpayers at the federal level and in BC at the federal and provincial level, going to reward these developers for not dropping their prices, for still trying to squeeze out as much as they could? And yes, construction costs have gone up. No question. The square footage cost for a building, like even the buildings we're living in, Eddie, have probably
Right.
more than doubled, I would say, over the last couple of years. So your
Mm-hmm.
square footage is up. And part of the problem is, too, that a lot of these developers kept getting more greedy and the units kept getting smaller. And to
Yeah.
a point where now most people, they're too small, they don't want them. So I think it's ill conceived. I don't think it was thought through properly. I think somebody saw an opportunity for a quick fix, and yes, we need a quick fix, no question.
Mm-hmm.
But even the units that have been started in the last year, when Carney first brought out his affordable housing program, and we're going to build, there aren't a lot of shovels in the ground yet, and there aren't a lot of completed units yet with people
Yeah.
moving in.
Well, I
So
think Premier Rebbe actually laid it out. I mean, I agree with you. I understand what they're trying to do here. There's an urgent need, okay, to find uh, affordable housing for a lot of people in this country. And they're trying to find a way to expedite where they possibly could. Now, what did I read? There was something like close to 5,000 condominium apartments empty at this particular point in time. So when I hear empty coming from the premier of Alberta, he's looking at, well, these units are empty. We can put them to good use right away because there's a lot of needy families out there. That tells me that these apartments are finished. Okay. And they want to get people in these apartments as quickly as possible, which, you know what? I'm actually for that. I want people to have an opportunity to raise their families in affordable housing. I think that the target for that particular housing being condominiums that have already been established and have been built is, first of all, not the right way to go because I feel it's a bailout program for the developers who built a high rise that is only 50% occupied and they're not selling because they, as you said, they're staying with their asking price and being greedy. So to me, that's taxpayer buyout, and I don't want to have anything to do with that. That's point number one. And point number two, at the same time, if individuals are buying a particular property type, where there are certain luxuries included with that, and you're paying X amount in terms of condominium fees, they're your HOAs, they might be significantly high. Then all of a sudden, 50% of the building is going to be rented out, where you start introducing security issues, and also rented out. There's going to be a continuous churn of people coming in and out of the building itself. Myself, with the expectation that my building is going to have a certain characteristic to it, it being sullied by this new program that the government wants to introduce in housing a lot of people out there, is not the right thing to do. I would prefer that they get the shovel into the ground and build apartments from scratch and get that moving. There are other homes out there that are low cost that potentially can be rented out to a lot of people that need it. It's just that the greed of a lot of these landlord owners puts a lot of these homes, apartments and homes out of reach. So you know what? I get what Mr. Carney's trying to accomplish here with Mr. Eby. My first reaction is, Mr. Carney, what the hell are you doing with this one? Makes zero sense to me. And it's one of the few times I'm not really happy with what he's proposing here. But I think time is going to tell in terms of what exactly does this program entail, because it's still too early a stage, Gary, for them to actually clearly say this is exactly how this is going to be rolled out. And I think they did say in a couple of months they're going to have a more formal plan about this. So I don't know what they were trying to accomplish by putting this out there now, where they don't have a real formulated plan to communicate to the public. But I get it. I think the insight in trying to do something like this get a quick win and get people in apartments. I think their hearts are in the right place. I'm not sure at the end of the day, and I agree with you, if they really thought this out in terms of the damage that this might do to existing property owners and myself as a taxpayer. I don't want my money being stuffed into some developer's pocket because, oh, woe is me, I can't sell my units. Drop the damn prices. All right, So I'm kind of mixed on this one, to tell you the truth. I'm with you 100% in terms of your thinking on this. Like, what are you guys thinking? I understand what you're trying to do. Go back to the drawing board and come up with something different, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
It gives me a bad taste.
Yeah, well, real estate analysts warn the move could bail out over leveraged developers while doing little to lower underlying structural construction costs.
And there is the problem.
Therein lies the problem. Buying stagnant units means public capital effectively clearing the balance sheets of private corporations who misjudged market demand. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it boils down to. Yeah. I think that they have to be really careful because there is a precedent trap here, and that is if the government establishes a floor price for unsold luxury real estate, it alters market risk mechanics. And that signals to developers that the public will absorb their losses.
Right.
No, we're not going to absorb your losses. And here's the other thing. On new units, when you buy a new unit, you have to pay GST. Who's going to pay the GST on these units?
Good point. Yeah.
Well, I guess the government will, or whatever agency they set up to buy. So it just, and I don't know why we have to pay GST on a new unit, but yet when you do a resale, you don't have to pay GST. If you're going to charge GST on the new unit, just keep charging it on the resale. Just keep rolling it in that way. Anyway, that's a whole other story that really gets to me. So our takeaway, Eddie?
Well, our takeaway, Gary, is using public money to acquire premium private real estate provides immediate house relief, but risks socializing the downside of speculative property development, Gary.
Boy, that was a mouthful.
Yeah. And coming up, a now gated national identity.
Finally ready to launch a website or move your site to a Canadian host? Check Web Hosting Canada, WHC, a Montreal company offering 3 times the speed of competitors. One-click installs for over 300 apps, including WordPress and Drupal, built-in security, servers located in Eastern and Western Canada, plus 24-hour assistance and competitive pricing. For more information, click on the affiliate link in the description below.
And in a historic media shift, Hockey Night in Canada.
A defining cornerstone of public broadcasting on the CBC, by the way,
is moving entirely behind a corporate paywall on Rogers Sportsnet.
Now, this transition marks the end of decades of free, universally accessible national sports culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, we grew up with it, Eddie.
Yes,
Saturday night.
I mean, we're
NHL
talking
hockey.
73, 74 years of active coverage by the CBC for the citizens of Canada. And Gary was a staple on your Saturday nights. It was a staple on my Saturday nights, the regulars. So I am so saddened and so disillusioned by the corporate take-ups of a lot of these national programs that you and I had been paying taxes to for years and years and years, just poof, gone, just like that.
Well, the whole thing is it's following through the professional sports world. As far as I'm concerned, it's it's all about the money. It's not about the product. It's all about the money. And Rogers 10 years ago struck the deal with the NHL, but the CBC was allowed to stay on for the 10-year period
Right.
and continue carrying the Saturday night games, and then the all playoff rounds. But the contract ended, and at the
Yep.
time there was a bidding war back then. There was a bidding war between Rogers and CBC, but the CBC is a public broadcaster, and they don't and should not have the money to jump into that professional pool of greed.
Hmm.
And so yeah, we still got our Saturday night hockey and on cable or on over the air TV, but most people have had cable by the 70s, 80s, and so we still had access to it. But now the deal's over with the CBC, and it's moving to Sportsnet exclusively. And I understand that Sportsnet just raised its prices.
Yes, they did.
And I think it was a fairly substantial amount. But that comes back around to these professional sports leagues have recognized that they have a pot of gold, the television rights, huge money generator for the league, and everything revolves around the television deals, and right down to the breaks through the period, the 2-minute breaks for the 2-minute commercial islands, which
Right.
just stops the game dead.
Hmm.
It's, I don't know. Like, I think personally that some of these leagues are getting to a point where it's becoming a turnoff. First of all, given the economic situation that we're in now, a lot of people can't afford the price of the tickets and the price of the food at the arenas, which we touched upon last week. And it's getting to a point now for a lot of Canadians, they're revisiting their cable packages and their streaming packages, because every time you turn around, streaming, which was supposed to make it much easier and be cheaper than cable, and it
As an
was,
alternate to cable, yeah.
yeah, has now surpassed. You can probably buy a cable package cheaper than what you can
Yeah.
for what you're paying for streaming. So a lot of Canadians are looking at that, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of people who are going to drop the Sportsnet package because they're tightening their belts, so they lose access to their hockey games.
Yeah, that's the sad part about all of this. I mean, we were talking about today. We spoke about subsidized housing and on the subject of affordability, I guess. So now all of a sudden you're going to have people that would enjoy the regular hockey broadcast on Saturday nights through the CPC no longer being available to them, which I think, at least here in Canada, that's really sad, Gary. I mean, hockey is a staple of our culture for more than a century. I mean, people in the good old days tuned in and gathered around the radio. Foster Hewitt,
Yes.
before he did the first television broadcast, Foster Hewitt on the radio. People gathered around the radio to listen to Foster Hewitt describe what's going on the ice. And, you know, that call that the bygone era, but still, I think even today it's importantly relevant, where Canadians were able to identify around the panel that was presented to us by the CBC every Saturday night. Their regional coverage of whatever hockey games were there to be broadcast and talked about, and I'm really saddened to see that particular staple of our culture disappear and fold it into uh, corporate America, if you want to call it. That's exactly what it is. Just the corporate mentality of sports in general. Look, I didn't necessarily agree with everything some of those guys, and there was a couple of clowns on the CBC broadcast crew, but it was still worth a listen, and you got the perspective as presented to Canadians by Canadians, and very often they would relate to, something that's happening in the country that might relate to ice hockey and how ice hockey can actually make your life a little bit better this week because of the fact it's been tough. Here's a hockey game for you to watch, and this is what we think. And there was a lot of good people on that. I just ran by some names. I mean, recent Bob Cole. I mean, him, Dick Irvin,
Mm-hmm.
Danny Gallivan. You're
Yes.
looking at the not Batman and Robin and Don McLean and Don Cherry. I mean, people used to tune in just to see what kind of stupidity would come out of their mouths, and it was the highest viewed 5 minutes throughout the entire country for an entire week just by tuning into Don Cherry and listening to what he had to say, intelligent or not. And then you remember the old Dave Hodge with the light blue Hockey Night
Yes.
Canada jacket. I mean, it was just so prim and proper, and we were really informed as to what was going on in the hockey world and what was going on in Canada. So it's really just really sad for me to actually see that disappear. And here's the age-old question, Gary. We talked about the CBC moons ago in terms of their budget and whatnot, and the bonuses being handed out to the public broadcaster in CBC. So all of a sudden, CBC won't be giving Rogers Sportsnet any more money for NHL broadcasts, right? Is their
Right.
budget going to be cut? Is
Ah,
my tax dollar and your tax dollar going to get any less?
no,
Is
no,
this
no,
is
no,
the is the
no,
chairman
no,
of CBC going to lose a little bit of her bonus? You know what? Probably not.
no, no. Now, CBC is going to replace the Hockey Night in Canada with sports programming that focuses more on amateur sports.
Right, correct.
Um, and that's fine.
At
But
7 o'clock on a Saturday night when hockey's
they're
being
not
played
going to
across the
draw.
country, coast to coast, they're not going to draw
No,
much. Unfortunately, I
no.
think it's a great effort. Great, it's great to show Canadians this. I just think they have it in the wrong time slot, to tell you the truth.
Well, first of all, I think somewhere along the way, the CBC has to find its way and stop trying to be all things to all people, or at least
Hmm.
go around promoting that they're trying to be all things to all people to keep that budget up so that they can pay the upper floors of headquarters on Front Street, Toronto. Um, CBC ratings are scarce,
Hmm.
so it's not a loss to the NHL. They'll pick it up for sure, and anyhow, I could go on about the CBC and where they should be going, but I won't. Done that once already, and I'll save it for another day when they make when one of their executives makes some kind of an asinine move. But it's broadcasters, especially public broadcasters overall, lack the financial capacity to protect or develop or maintain traditional public access. But the CBC is no angel in this because you have to pay for CBC News Network. Aren't we
Hmm.
already paying every year before the end of April through our taxes? You have to pay for they have a number of other areas where it's pay as you view or pay as you listen, pay as you go kind of thing. So they're not,
Gem, for example. Yeah.
yeah. So they're not without shame here either when you get down to what they're doing elsewhere. But to lose this tradition, because there are still a lot of communities that don't have access to solid internet service yet, and they do have over-the-air TV and usually just CBC now. And they lose out totally on that tradition, and also being able to watch Canada's game.
Mm-hmm.
So there's small numbers across this great country that have lost access to at least one hockey game a week.
Yeah.
And when you look back, Eddie, every Saturday night in our house, my mother would, just before the hockey game came on, would fry up some burgers and get some fries ready. And then by the time the hockey game came on, that was our Saturday night treat, was,
Mm-hmm.
burgers and fries and watching the hockey game. And it was always, in the Maritimes anyway, the game didn't start until 10 o'clock, I think it was. So through the regular season, we only got about half of the game.
Right.
And then during the playoffs, you would get the whole game. So, but those Saturday night traditions, and my brother, staunch Montreal Canadian fan, and me, a staunch Toronto Maple Leafs fan. So there we were in the living room with our father and mother and watching the hockey game and having our burgers and fries. And when the Leafs and the Canadians were playing each other, like, Wayne and I going back and forth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a memory, right? That's
Well, you mentioned your family, your mom, your dad, and your brother. Brought me back, Gary. My mom coming from Slovenia. My mom learned how to speak English watching CBC.
wow.
Literally, she loved watching hockey. She loved that sport. I'd be with her. My dad would be reading the newspaper. He couldn't care less what was going on in the television. But my mom watched hockey with me, and my sisters watched hockey with me along with my mom. And over the course of time, she's learned to swear like a hockey player as well. So she did learn English, and she really understood the game of hockey, the nuances of it. I mean, it's amazing to see her when she was in her 80s talking to me about a hockey game. Did you see bleep, 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 bleep? And she knew her hockey, So my memory goes back to that. And how many wonderful memories of Canadians coast to coast will go back to that in their minds and say, I grew up with this, and it's just so sad to see such a tradition just dry up. And let me ask you, Gary, is this something you think the CBC chose not to pursue, or is it something that Rogers Sportsnet outpriced it so much that they wanted to put CBC out of business when it came to NHL coverage, or a little bit of both?
I think that the CPC saw the writing on the wall when they lost out the first time around, and
12
Rogers
years ago.
got it. Yeah, and they struck the deal. It was a 10-year deal, and they knew that eventually, especially where Rogers was developing Sportsnet, that the writing was on the wall that Rogers would want that product exclusively for Sportsnet, and they had the money to do it.
Yeah.
We're talking big dollars here that Rogers is paying the NHL for another contract, and they paid big dollars 10 or 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, as I say, it's this is now just strictly it's all about the money, not necessarily about the product. And talking about our Saturday nights watching Hockey Night in Canada growing up, point I came across kind of echoes that. Moving cultural assets to premium cable or streaming networks creates an economic filter around an experience that historically unified the country across socioeconomic lines.
So sad to see that go. I really am. I love CBC sports coverage, especially during the Olympics. I'm glued to the Olympics watching CBC. They did such a great job, and they did such a great job with the NHL as well. So I guess that's just going to be the epitaph on the gravestone, right? It was great while it lasted.
Yep, that's the way it is. Now, let's do our takeaway.
Okay. Well, gating iconic cultural programming behind private corporate paywalls forces Canadians to pay a premium to access their own national traditions.
And just before we get to a wrap up, I missed a couple of comments related to the condo buyout. So I just thought I'd bring those up. I don't know how I missed them, but I did. I apologize for that. From Elizabeth. So, wow. Her house was valued at 1.8 million. Never once did they come out to evaluate and see all the work that was needed. Paid the taxes on it and honestly feel sorry for the people that bought it. Wow.
Interesting.
And best thing to do today is not own a property, but rent. I'm kind of feeling that way as well, actually.
Yeah.
All right, so we're caught up there. Let me put this on the table. Tonight wasn't really about crime, housing, or hockey. It was about pressure. Pressure on institutions. Pressure on governments. Pressure on things Canadians assumed would always work the same way. And when systems start changing under pressure, people start asking harder questions. And speaking of questions, I leave you with this. It'll be in the pin to the comment section below the live stream. What changes Canadians more over time? Losing security? Losing affordability? Or losing shared experiences? And that's a wrap on episode 89. Where can people find us, Eddie?
Well, we are here on YouTube, YouTube Shorts, Facebook, Instagram Reels, and yes, TikTok. Remember to like, share, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform. I'm Eddie Takalik. Good night, everyone.
And I'm Gary MacDonald. Thank you for your support. Night Talk Canada returns in 7 days. Good night.